He's just 38 years old, the son of an Indian immigrant. He's gay, outspoken, and he's Ireland's taoiseach.
My instinct as a politician is always to say what I think. Maybe sometimes people misinterpret that as megaphone diplomacy.
Leo Varadkar's personal story has made him an international hit. But at home, he faces the biggest political and economic challenge in living memory: Brexit.
A European Union without Britain is going to be a very different place on so many issues, particularly economic issues.
A difficult place for Ireland?
Potentially.
Could an increasingly fraught UK exit from Europe pose a threat to peace and prosperity here in Northern Ireland?
We've had enormous progress in the last couple of decades, increased prosperity on both sides of the border and almost total peace. Potentially those things are in jeopardy if the wrong decisions are made.
Since he took office, we have been with him at key events. In 48 hours, he faces his biggest to date, when he will meet other EU leaders to determine the direction of the Brexit talks.
At that point, Prime Minister May is asked to leave the room, and she does.
Tonight on Spotlight, an exclusive interview with the taoiseach at this defining moment. The taoiseach, on his first official visit to Northern Ireland, can almost afford to be relaxed. But the intensity of the media scrum at Queen's University illustrates a heightened level of interest in this particular taoiseach at this particular time. Politicians, business and civic leaders and academics fill the Great Hall to bursting.
There's been huge interest in this visit. The hall here at Queen's is over capacity. Everyone wants to see the new taoiseach on his first official visit to Northern Ireland.
Interest is heightened by what's at stake, with real fears that Northern Ireland could move backwards if Brexit goes the wrong way. And Stormont is in crisis.
We need an answer to a very simple question. Who do we in Europe speak to when we want to speak to Belfast? Time is running out, and I fear no extra time will be allowed.
He has a blunt message for the Brexiteers. If they want Brexit and no border in Northern Ireland, then they must spell out how.
These are, of course, the advocates of the so-called hard Brexit. And I believe the onus is on them to come up with proposals for such a border.
But beyond the hall, even in advance of this visit, the new tone was drawing unionist condemnation.
What did you make of the Taoiseach's comments regarding not designing a border for the Brexiteers? Was that helpful?
No, it wasn't helpful, but I mean, I can't design what the Irish Prime Minister is going to say. They should reflect on whether they're being helpful to the process here in Northern Ireland or not. They have made various interventions recently in relation to Northern Ireland politics, and the sort of megaphone diplomacy that has been engaged in is not helpful.
The question is, does this blunt new tone from the leader of the Irish government mark a significant political shift?
Thank you. Taoiseach, are we seeing a change of style or substance, a change of tone, or actually a change to the message?
Obviously, I do a different style to my forebear. All politicians are different. We all have different personalities, so style is different. Substance will be different too, but not because it's me. Substance will be different because this is a rapidly evolving situation.
Thank you very much for sparing the time for us.
When I sat down with the taoiseach for our exclusive interview for Spotlight, I began by asking him more about this new tone and style.
Some of that change has irked unionists who've accused you and your government of megaphone diplomacy. Do you keep a megaphone handy?
I wouldn't say I keep a megaphone handy. I suppose my instinct as a politician is always to say what I think. And sometimes that gets me into trouble, but it's my nature to say what I believe to be true, and to say what I think and level with people. And maybe sometimes people misinterpret that as megaphone diplomacy. It's not. It's being straight with people.
Your foreign minister perhaps gave an example of that when he said there would be no return to British only direct rule. Do you concur?
We want to see the Northern Ireland Executive up and running. We have an agreed constitutional settlement in Ireland, the Good Friday Agreement. We want the Assembly meeting. We want the North-South Ministerial Council happening. I don't even want to contemplate the alternatives, because the alternatives are another election, and I don't see what that would achieve. Our return to direct rule, and you're right, we couldn't support the return to direct rule, but I don't think it would be helpful at this point in speculating.
Will the Irish government maintain a role?
The role that we want to have is one of partnership, where we, as politicians from the Republic of Ireland, meet across the table of the North-South Ministerial Council and engage with our counterparts in that way. And so much has been achieved in that way. You know, just here in Derry, for example, we have a situation whereby cancer patients from Donegal receive their treatment in Altnagelvin. Cardiology patients receive treatment in Altnagelvin, and we can, by working together, put things in Derry, for example, that would otherwise be in Dublin and Belfast.
Just in terms of Brexit, what difference would having Stormont in place make? Because Theresa May has already said she will dictate what happens on Brexit, not Northern Ireland, not Scotland. She will overrule their wishes.
I think in a constitutional setup that exists in the United Kingdom with devolved administrations, I think it would be wise for Prime Minister May to listen to those devolved administrations. The same goes for Wales, the same goes for Northern Ireland. And it's unfortunate that at a time when critical decisions are going to be made in Brussels, in Westminster, that will affect people in Northern Ireland and affect them very much in their daily lives, that there is no Northern Ireland Executive, there is no First Minister or Deputy First Minister to be part of that.
Now, your tone when you spoke in Belfast, for instance, to the Brexiteers was design your own border. It's kind of DIY, do it yourself, if you want one that's frictionless. That's a tough tone, but what's their response?
It's still not clear what the United Kingdom actually wants in terms of a new relationship. Because on the one hand, it seems that the United Kingdom wants to have a close trading relationship with Europe, just like it has now, but it also seems to want something different. And it's very hard for us as European Prime Ministers really to understand exactly what the United Kingdom wants the new relationship to look like. It certainly can't be, and I think anyone will understand it can't be having all the benefits of EU membership, but none of the responsibilities and none of the costs. If you join a club, you obey the rules and you pay the membership fee. You can't have the benefits of being a member of a club if you don't obey the rules and you won't pay the membership fee. So, you know, it's quite a difficult negotiation when people who want to leave the European Union in Britain don't really seem to agree among themselves what that actually means.
At 38, Leo Varadkar is the youngest ever taoiseach. His doctor father, Ashok, is an Indian immigrant. His mother, Miriam, from Waterford, a nurse. He too went into medicine, qualifying as a doctor, before politics became a full-time career. He came out as gay 2 years ago in the run-up to the marriage equality referendum in the Republic. It seemed to mark a significant turning point, not just personally, but professionally too.
It's the Taoiseach walking down Waring Street on a Saturday morning. Looks like the everyday, but of course it's not. And what makes this more unusual is it's the first openly gay Taoiseach attending Belfast Pride, despite strong objections.
Really delighted to be here at Belfast Pride. Not here to unsettle anyone, but I am here to state my support, my government's support for equality before the law and individual freedom for all citizens, no matter where they may happen to reside.
The Bible teaches us that righteousness exalteth a nation.
But his very attendance at the event has ruffled feathers, politically and beyond.
Well, I think his attempt to politicise something that is moral is totally unacceptable. These are moral issues that we're dealing with, based entirely upon the authority of Scripture. We do not recognise same-sex marriages, and therefore for the Prime Minister of another jurisdiction to interfere in the moral issues of another jurisdiction, we feel is just not acceptable.
But with gay PSNI officers on the march with their colleagues from the Gardaí, times are clearly changing. Organisers claim Pride is bigger than the 12th in Belfast. Is Rainbow the new orange?
This is the biggest march in Northern Ireland this year, and it's a march that celebrates diversity and difference as a strength.
I think there's a really shared positive experience. I think that the Taoiseach's visit is excellent. I think everybody is on the same page in terms of equality, so we're all celebrating together.
I'm sorry, I'm not wearing the heels, so I'm impressed with you being able to keep up this.
Thank you.
It's a cross-dressing, cross-border, cross-community, lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender carnival. The youthful master of ceremonies is Belfast's Lord Mayor, Nuala McAllister, who, as an atheist, made headlines for breaking with the tradition of saying grace at her installation dinner. It's a snap of life in 2017. You came out as gay in the run-up to the marriage equality referendum in the Republic. Did you come out because politics in Ireland was changing, Ireland itself was changing, or have you found that your politics has changed by the fact that now you have come out as a gay man?
Well, I suppose there's two aspects to it. There's the personal journey that you come out within your own mind, which allows you to come out to yourself, which is the first thing you have to do before you tell the public. But I suppose the real catalyst for me was the fact that we were having that referendum, that there was going to be a referendum on marriage equality in Ireland, and I was part of a government that was going to campaign for a yes vote. And in having some of the arguments and debates with people, I just was unable to talk about it as if it didn't matter to me, as if it wasn't personal. And I think the moment I decided that I would tell the public that I am a gay man, that was when I was with one of my colleagues, and one of my colleagues was very supportive of a yes vote, but talked about how we need to be generous to them. And I kind of needed to say to him then, I am one of them. You know, we're everywhere. We're all around you. We're your brothers and sisters and friends and co-workers. And you know, for me, it wouldn't have been possible to go through that referendum campaign talking about it objectively.
Previously, some commentators called you Tory boy because of your youth and because of your right-wing politics. You know, are you Tory boy wrapped in a rainbow flag?
You know, your opponents always like to characterise you. I often find that when people can't argue with you on the facts, they try to characterise you in a certain way or attack you personally, and that's very much a feature of politics. You know, I'm somebody who is passionately pro-European. I doubt anyone could argue that being a Tory policy, for example, just to give you one example. So, you know, I don't copy my politics from other jurisdictions. My politics is very much about Ireland and about the future of Ireland. And for me, it's very much the politics of the centre, taking some of the good ideas from the right and some of the good ideas from the left and putting them together. So I suppose if it comes to the kind of good ideas from the right, I very much believe in balancing the books. I think we should manage our public finances in a prudent way, pay down the debt. I think we should give taxpayers some of their money back. People who work very hard, who make it possible to fund our public services and welfare system, should have as little tax taken off them as is necessary. But then, of course, there are lots of things from the left-wing side of politics that I think we need to embrace, particularly things around personal liberty and diversity.
Irish politics is tribal, north and south. In the south, of course, it's defined and has been by the Civil War. In the north, it's orange and green. And perhaps you've become a big story because you sort of confound those easy boxes to be placed in. Your Indian heritage, for instance, gives you something different too. And I noticed an interesting quote from a cousin of yours in India who said that you came from a long line of freedom fighters, leaders and social reformers. Tell us about that. Why freedom fighters? Is that part of your Indian heritage too? Because for many people in Ireland, freedom fighting is something different.
Yeah, it is. It is a little bit, of course. You know, my father grew up in India, was born I think around 38 or 40, so was born before independence, and some of his older brothers, you know, were involved in agitating, if you like, for independence from Britain in India. I suppose what was almost always the case, though, in India, and it's something that we should always bear in mind, was the liberation struggle and the independence struggle was one that was very peaceful and led by Mahatma Gandhi, somebody who opposed violence and never used violence. And yet he was able to free the largest country in the world from the largest empire in the world without using violence. And I think that's something that I think really should be a strong lesson to people in this country.
Next summer, there may be a papal visit from Pope Francis. Now, the last papal visit took place in the year you were born, 1979.
That's right.
And since then, contraception's been legalised, divorce has been legalised, homosexuality decriminalised, and we've had the marriage equality referendum. Will Pope Francis, when he arrives in Ireland next summer, find a country where abortion has been legalised?
Well, I think first of all, I think he'll get a very warm welcome, notwithstanding the fact that the Ireland of 2017 is a very different place to the Ireland of 1979. I think everyone's very enthusiastic about the visit, and the Catholic faith is still the strongest faith in the country by quite a distance, so I think he's going to be very welcome. Our intention is to have a referendum on the 8th Amendment on abortion next year, and ultimately that is going to be a decision that the people will make. I do think that there is a strong majority now in the country for change, to liberalise our existing abortion laws. The question really though is to what extent, and we want to put a question to the public that they'll be able to say yes or no to, and that isn't as straightforward as it may seem.
There's possibly nowhere with more to lose than Ireland, north and south, if the Brexit talks fail. But what happens depends on what is decided elsewhere. Last month, in a much-anticipated speech in Italy, Theresa May offered some assurances.
We and the EU have committed to protecting the Belfast Agreement and the Common Travel Area. And looking ahead, we have both stated explicitly that we will not accept any physical infrastructure at the border.
But much was left unsaid. So the first European leader to visit Theresa May in Downing Street after her Florence speech was Taoiseach Leo Varadkar.
It's just 3 days since Theresa May tried to reset the tone of the Brexit negotiations with a major speech in Italy. Leo Varadkar gave that speech a guarded welcome, but he's here today to try and find out if he can get more detail.
One thing that I think was very important that was included in her Florence speech was the fact that Britain will not seek any physical infrastructure on the border. And to me that's very important. That there'll be no physical infrastructure is a very strong statement in my view.
But where does power lie? In London or Dublin? With the UK leaving Europe, have the tables turned? In 48 hours, the Taoiseach will decide with the remaining European leaders if the UK will get its wish to move forward at this stage in the Brexit talks.
Actually, what happens when the leaders of Europe get together in that room?
Essentially, the only people who are around the table, the only people in the room are the Prime Ministers of Europe. So what we'll do this week is we'll have our regular meeting, discuss whatever new European laws are being made, and then we'll go into something called Article 50 format, which is when we talk about Brexit. So at that point, Prime Minister May is asked to leave the room, and she does.
How strange will it be to watch, another European leader have to leave the room for you to have that discussion?
Yeah. Well, it's strange on two levels. On one level, it's interesting for a Prime Minister of Ireland, a small country of less than 5 million people that used to be part of the United Kingdom, sitting around the table with France and Germany, making decisions that are going to affect the United Kingdom. For many centuries, it was the other way around. They made decisions that affected us. So that's a little bit ironic. But it's also something that I find deeply regrettable. Because no matter what happens with Brexit, and no matter what form Brexit takes, the United Kingdom will be no longer around the table. Big decisions that affect Europe, policies that will affect the world, even rules around trade that, whether they like it or not, the United Kingdom will still need to follow, will now be made in their absence.
But if the UK wants a hard Brexit, Ireland can't stop it. And if the UK gets a deal, Ireland will have no power to block a deal it doesn't like.
But surely the truth of the matter is that ultimately Theresa May, and even Boris Johnson potentially, they have more control over what happens in Ireland now in relation to Brexit than you do, because they're the people that will decide whether it's a hard or soft Brexit, not you.
I'm not sure if that's the case. So, obviously, any kind of agreement that's going to be made is going to have to be one that's made between the EU and the UK. We are a union of 27 countries, 500 million people, one of the biggest economies in the world. So we're actually negotiating from a real position of strength.
But you won't have a veto at the end of the day.
That's correct. Yeah, we won't. Although I would never like to be in a position where we'd have to use a veto, even if we had one, because what we've tried to do and what we've succeeded in doing is making sure that Irish concerns and Irish ambitions are absolutely part of the European negotiating position.
But if the rest of Europe decides to move on, it can, and Ireland won't be able to stop it.
Look, I suppose it's very difficult to figure out hypothetical scenarios, but we want to move on too. Again, it's not really clear exactly what the United Kingdom wants out of this new relationship, other than having it both ways, which of course isn't possible.
And indeed, there are different positions, it seems, coming from different members of the British government. How much of a concern is that for you as the Irish leader, and indeed perhaps for other European leaders around that table?
Well, it is a concern, but it's not something I can do anything about. I think the fact that it is a minority government, that there clearly are tensions within the government, doesn't help anyone.
Ireland, of course, and the UK were good friends throughout in Europe on many issues. So who are your real friends now if the UK exits?
Yeah, well, first of all, we're still good friends, and whatever happens, I want Ireland and the United Kingdom to have a very close relationship, both economically and politically. But it is the case that Britain, or a European Union without Britain, is going to be a very different place. On so many issues, particularly economic issues, tax issues, Britain and Ireland are like-minded and very much aligned. So Europe without Britain is going to be a different place.
A difficult place for Ireland?
Potentially. So one of the things obviously we're going to have to do is build up new alliances.
Brexit may be driving other new alliances. It emerged today that European aerospace giant Airbus is taking a stake in Bombardier, Northern Ireland's biggest manufacturing employer. It may give them extra clout to fight a trade battle with the US that threatens thousands of jobs in Belfast. Speaking before this news, Leo Varadkar said the company both needed and deserved European backing.
You've made a comment on the Bombardier situation in Northern Ireland, said that is a lesson for the UK in the context of Brexit. Why?
Well, I think first of all, it's an issue that we're very concerned about. Bombardier is a huge employer. I think employs about 4,000 people in Northern Ireland and is a big part of the economy. So we're actually working to help Bombardier. Met with a Canadian cabinet minister just last week, and we discussed this, and we're using our contacts in the United States to try and have a more favourable decision, because we want to protect the jobs and the economy here in Northern Ireland as well, and we're very much on your side in that regard. In terms of Brexit, though, I do think it should give some people a little bit of pause for thought. The United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, as part of the European Union, is strong. We're a big economy, we're 500 million people, and if we do get into a trade conflict with America, we're in a much stronger position than the United Kingdom is on its own. And bear in mind that negotiating trade deals is very difficult. If the United Kingdom needs to now go off and negotiate a trade deal with the United States, just look at what they're doing at the moment in relation to Bombardier. They're a huge country. They're a very strong economic power. And the United Kingdom negotiating trade deals on its own, no longer part of the European Union, will be in quite a weak position.
You've spoken on this issue, but Europe has largely been silent. Where is Europe on this if Northern Ireland is still part of Europe and requires their support?
When I am at the European Council, and I will be there on Thursday and Friday, it's something that I am going to talk to President Juncker about and seek the support of the European Union for Bombardier, at least for so long as the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland is still in the European Union. We should be on your side in this regard.
Last month, the Taoiseach travelled to London to join Ireland's final pitch to host the Rugby World Cup in 2023. The all-Ireland bid faces stiff competition from fellow Europeans, the French.
France has sent its minister to make the bid. Ireland has sent its Taoiseach. This is political, even though it's sport.
As for Brexit, the Taoiseach admitted he'd been quizzed on the matter during Ireland's presentation to the bosses of World Rugby.
How did you reassure everyone that Brexit won't be an issue for this bid?
Yeah, the question was asked, and I thought it was a very, very, very fair question as to how Brexit might impact on this bid. And what I pointed out was that while there's plenty of uncertainty about Brexit, about political arrangements and trading relationships, one thing that is certain is that the common travel area will remain in place.
But the Brexit vote has put huge uncertainty into North-South relations and institutions. Even rugby, an all-island sport with a structure that predates partition, is not unscathed. Though retired rugby legend Brian O'Driscoll proved he could still dodge and pass with style when tackled.
Now, Brian, rugby, of course, is an all-island institution, and this is an all-island bid. Have you any concerns about Brexit, how that might affect things?
No, well, listen, Brexit's not my expertise. In fact, I don't know whose expertise it is. I don't envisage there being any issues. If you want more detail, I'll talk to the Taoiseach.
Okay.
The devil is always in the detail, and citizens' rights could prove as tricky to resolve as the border. An Irish citizen in Belfast will demand the same European rights as one in Dublin. Can the Taoiseach ensure they remain the same after Brexit?
If we can look at the detail a little bit, anyone in Northern Ireland could claim Irish citizenship under the Good Friday Agreement. What if they want to go and get health treatment in another European country? After Brexit, who's going to pay for that?
As far as we're concerned, after Brexit, nothing should change in terms of citizens' rights. People in Northern Ireland should continue with the right to be Irish citizens and by virtue of that be citizens of the European Union too. And of course that's going to be a big advantage for people in Northern Ireland, because it's going to give people in Northern Ireland the right to live, work, study anywhere in the European Union, which is something that English and Scottish and Welsh people won't be allowed to do.
Is that guaranteed?
Nothing is guaranteed until everything is agreed, but I'm very confident that we'll have that as part of the final agreement. So, and something I'm very committed to do is to make sure that people in Northern Ireland continue with the right to be European citizens.
But there is a financial implication too. As I say, for instance, if it's healthcare or education and a UK that has left the EU says we're not paying for this, will you pick up the tab as the Irish government?
Well, I'm not sure what costs arise.
Well, let's say, for instance, someone gets a hip replacement in Estonia because they can't get it at home. Under European rules, that's perfectly normal, and the bill would normally be sent back to the host country. But in this case, the host country will have left the EU. So is the host country now in Dublin?
That's one of the many complicated details we're going to have to work out over the next couple of years. I think it's probably the case that we wouldn't have to pay for that. You know, there are Irish citizens who live in Australia and Canada, for example, or America, and if they rocked up in Madrid and had an operation done, would the bill be sent to the Irish government? It isn't at the moment, so I don't see why that would happen.
But the problem here is then, potentially then, someone in Northern Ireland may not have the same rights as someone living in the Republic of Ireland if they can't access services like that on the same basis. So this is a conundrum. Would you be willing to consider paying for it if that protected their rights? Is that the objective?
Citizens' rights don't necessarily go that far. And you know, we do find that there are people who are Irish citizens who come to Dublin and Cork who aren't entitled, for example, to avail of our health system or welfare system because they're not habitually resident. So, you know, I wouldn't be planning to change that. The costs would be phenomenal, and I think our taxpayers would have difficulty bearing that.
It sounds perhaps that you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is on this one.
Where I'm willing to put money behind things is things that are going to bring the two parts of the island closer together. The A5, for example, a project that I'm very much committed to. I'm not sure I'd be paying anyone paying for anyone's operations in Estonia. That wouldn't be a priority spend.
The British have said they don't want any infrastructure at the border, nor do you. But under European rules, you're going to have to enforce some customs if the UK leaves.
What I want is there to be no new barrier to trade between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and the best way to achieve that is through a customs union, the United Kingdom staying in the customs union.
How do you achieve that though? Because nobody in the UK wants to do that. It's sort of stay in the customs union, or what? What do you do?
Well, what they say they want is a customs partnership or a customs union partnership, but they haven't quite detailed what that means. I would like to detail what that means. And what it means to me is an arrangement by which we can continue to have free trade north and south, east and west, with no new barriers, because anything short of that does require some form of checks. People can pretend otherwise, but it would. It would involve, at the very least, bureaucracy, people filling in forms, all of those things.
So you're kind of saying, though, to the Brexiteers, forget about Brexit. That's the only solution.
Well, again, this is, I suppose, part of the point. We need much more clarity and a greater understanding as to what Brexit really means and what it's going to look like. It's very clear that the people of the UK, by a small margin, voted to leave the European Union. Did they vote to leave the customs union as well? Did they vote to leave the single market? But it does seem that some people on the Brexit side actually want to leave absolutely everything to do with Europe, including all of those things, and I think that would be regrettable. But there's one thing that I think it's important to say. When I travel across Europe, when I'm in Berlin, when I'm in Brussels, when I'm meeting Macron, Merkel, Prime Ministers and Presidents, there is a real understanding that Northern Ireland is unique, that this is a special place, that the peace is still fragile and the peace is still young. And because of that, there will be enormous flexibility shown towards Northern Ireland. Whereas, a hard line may be taken in negotiations with Britain and with London, there is a real willingness across Europe to be flexible and creative when it comes to Northern Ireland, to create a unique solution for Northern Ireland if that's required. And I just hope that the people and the politicians in Northern Ireland understand that that's actually could be a big advantage for this part of the world and this part of the country, and not to see it as some sort of threat to the constitutional settlement or some sort of threat to the Union. It isn't. There is a willingness to be flexible, to bend the rules for Northern Ireland, and I really hope that Northern Irish political leaders and the community here in Northern Ireland takes advantage of that.
Amid all the uncertainty and change in Irish politics over many years, one thing has remained constant: a mutual loathing between Fine Gael and Sinn Féin. In some ways, the new Taoiseach has taken this to a new level.
Deputy MacDonald reminds me more and more of Marine Le Pen, because she always goes back to her script. Is it any small wonder that the people in Northern Ireland do not have an executive or an assembly? Because this is the attitude of Sinn Féin. Constantly hectoring, smart aleck remarks, lack of temperance, lack of respect for other people, inability to listen to them, and inability to listen to compromise.
I'll do my utmost to ensure that there are no interruptions. No interruptions, please. You might like the answers. I have no control over that.
I also, if I may, would like to get the Taoiseach some friendly advice in relation to the North. I was going to do this privately with you, but I'll just do it now. No one in the North is impressed when you refer to Northern issues.
In relation to the North, I always appreciate the Deputy's advice.
Your government Taoiseach is rudderless, and you have been revealed now. The Emperor has no clothes. Taoiseach Leo is buck naked. No vision and no ambition for our country or for our people.
How much do you dislike Sinn Féin? It seems to be obvious from Dáil encounters.
Look, they're a competitor party. Unlike any other party in Northern Ireland, we compete with them for votes. So it's a slightly different context than the relationship would be with Alliance or SDLP or UUP or DUP. Thankfully, in my constituency, they don't have any TDs, but they may do in the future. And of course, we're very different parties.
Is it inconceivable that you might ever share power?
I can't conceive of it. We're just too different, and it's not just about.
Is that to rule it out?
I have ruled it out, and it's the differences aren't just about the violence and the issues in the past. It's really about everything else. We're very much a pro-European party, an internationalist party. They're actually anti-European. They're now making out that they're pro-European or Euro-critical or something like that, but they campaigned against every single European referendum, including the ones to join the single market and the Euro. We're a very pro-business party. They're not. We believe in reducing taxes on middle-income people. They don't. There's such a huge difference between the two parties.
What about Brexit and the big picture? Has it made a united Ireland more or less likely?
I think that's impossible to predict at this stage, particularly again because we don't really know what the shape of Brexit is going to be. But I'm very committed to the agreement that we have, which is the Good Friday Agreement. which essentially is about power sharing here in Northern Ireland, the North and South working together, and then us working in a bigger context with Britain as well. It's something that was approved by referendum here, 70% of people, 95% in the Republic, and I think that's a good settlement, and we should try and make it work. I wouldn't like us to get to the point whereby we're changing the constitutional position here in Northern Ireland on a 50% plus one basis. One of the best things about the Good Friday Agreement is that it did get very strong cross-border support. That's why there was a 70% vote for it. I don't think there would be a 70% vote for a United Ireland in the morning, for example, or anything remotely to that. And I really think we should focus on making the agreement that we have work.
Leo Varadkar represents a new generation of Irish leader at a crossroads in the history of these islands. As the UK moves towards the exit door of the EU, decisions taken in Europe this week and beyond will put him to the test and shape the future of Ireland, North and South, for generations to come.